Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about primetime matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
This is the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Sharon and Eric Lopez.
And we welcome you to this edition of the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. I'm Eric Lopez, alongside Kyle and Nash. Everybody else apparently still trying to figure out if they have power or not. I know Jeff may not have power as we talk, thanks to Nicole. Drew is just working, so he's why he's not available. And Bryson's away from the town, so it's just you and me, Kyle.
Hey, you know what, though? It's still going to be a fun time all the way around. We don't have to remember all of Drew's nicknames. And, if we happen to talk about spreads, Jeff won't get mad. I'm kidding. No,
exactly. You
can
follow us.
Everybody fared well in the storm, too.
Hopefully everybody did all right, especially on the coastal line. And the coastal, that really got hit pretty hard over there. Luckily, me and Kyle are inland, so we were not too bad. But hopefully everybody else is. Coming up, we'll break down the big football game this Saturday in Nolens with the Tulane and UCF Top 25 matchup. Who's going to start at quarterback? I'm going to ask Kyle because Gus wouldn't give the answer. We'll also preview youth basketball. Season's underway. We'll talk about the men's and the women. Plus, I'll also break down UCF women's soccer making the NCAA tournament. But why didn't they host? I'll break that all down. Coming up on this edition of Black and Gold Banneret. Of course, check us out at blackandgoldbanneret.com for all the latest. Of course, follow up. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow us on your favorite social media devices, folks. Let's get to going here, Kyle. Let's talk about the football game. UCF, obviously, in Tulane, big game, top 25. Not college game day material big, but still big. They'll be in Austin for TCU in Texas, and based on social media, Tulane hasn't really taken that one very well. That's their problem. But what we do know is that both teams are in the top 25. The winner of this game really takes a huge step into not only getting to the American Athletic Conference Championship game, but possibly hosting, whereas the loser might need some help. UCF coming off the win over Memphis, 35-20. Let me start with that, Kyle, because you did not get a chance to be on night shift with Drew and Bryce and myself after the Memphis game. So I'm just going to give you the platform. What's your quick thoughts now that you've had some time to reflect on the Memphis win?
This is one of those games where we absolutely reflect two things that were already proven true. A, at the time, well, actually, I should say three things. A, at the time he was asked to start, John Rice Plumlee was the correct choice. B, these skill players are so good, Eric Lopez. Oh, my gosh. And C, this red zone defense thing just got a lot more real. Now, granted, it was cute when you and I had the great response, Drew, as well, to those who might have been over-optimistic about this defense in the red zone in particular. Well, that's great when it's South Carolina State and this team and that team. Doing this against Memphis isn't uber impressive, but it's more impressive and really has put a stamp on this game. Elo, with the mistakes that Mikey Keene made early, I believe he's going to need to tap in some of that NIL money to afford the beer that he owes the defense for bailing him out, sir.
Well, expand on that. What, as far as the defense bailing him out, obviously you're speaking of that early interception where Memphis had the ball in the red zone. Memphis didn't score in their first 3 red zone appearances. UCF defense, I'm assuming that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, when they come away to a team, by the way, in the previous edition of the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast, Jeff pointed out that the UCF defense doesn't typically do well creating takeaways. And when they needed it, to get Keene out of trouble with the early interception. I believe that was in the red zone, by the way, or within, sorry, not in the red zone, but within UCF territory, so that the Tigers were in the red zone. Here comes that tip ball, the whole circus, whatever snag eventually that would fall in the hands of Devon Wilson. Or was it Devontae Brown that got it? I forget which. I think it was Devontae. To snag the interception and, like I said, bail Mikey out. Remember what made the Pirates game go wrong, Elo? The whole situation in ECU was those early turnovers that made it turn sour. The difference here, defense got the turnovers and got the ball back, and Mikey recovered, whereas JRP didn't.
So UCF ends with the win of Memphis, moved up in both the polls in 22. Of course, on Monday, Gus Malzahn had his traditional media availability, and it didn't take long for the media to ask him the biggest question in the room, the elephant in the room, shall we say. And of course, I speak of, hey, coach, what about the quarterback position?
So I got to ask, what's the quarterback situation heading into this week? Who's the starter when we know?
Yeah, we'll play that day by day and see where we're at.
What's going to go into that decision? Is it health?
Really just what gives us the best chance of winning. Both guys, like I said, we got two real guys. You know that, and everyone knows that, and that's a great luxury.
Now, just to carry business on the road, how much is it safe to say that ECU was that wake-up call, and how much is that going to be helpful, not just for this past game, but leading into Tulane?
Yeah, that was a learning experience like we talked about. We responded well on the road. There was a lot of ups and downs last week. Our guys responded like champs, and it was a pretty good environment, too, at Memphis, and our guys found a way to win. They'd won a whole lot of games at home.
Some coaches think that you don't sit a player because of an injury. During your coaching career, what's been your philosophy on that?
Yeah, it just depends. Every situation is different. And, when you have a head injury, obviously that is different within its own right. Just, you protect your players. You make decisions that you feel like is best for them and your team, and that's what we do.
There is Gus Malzahn, folks. I kid you not. I did not edit any of that. Kyle, you were trying to throw him a lifeline. You were the only one. You deviated from the quarterback position. You asked about the road win and how ECU kind of helped them prepare. Everybody else, Brandon Hellwig, Jason Beatty, Trey Strelko, basically asking about the quarterback position, and Gus didn't budge.
Well, listen, and with respect to my colleagues, if you thought he was answering that question, apparently they're going to need to legalize weed in this state. No, listen, I joke, but yeah, he wasn't going to budge on that. And from his perspective, I understand it. And listen, we were actually talking about it before he got there, how he's kind of using that as part of a strategy, if you will, an element that Tulane doesn't know who's starting. Listen, I'd rather not have my quarterback with a head injury either. I get that if I'm a coach, but if I can use it to shroud what was going on, I'm going to do that. So with all that in mind, part of it, I believe, is they're not really sure what JRP's situation is. You as a Dolphins fan can understand that within this state, extra scrutiny is going to be put on you when it comes to head injuries. Heck, the women's basketball even had to deal with that when Taylor.
We'll get into that later on. Yeah.
Upcoming stuff we'll talk about there, no doubt. So I think Gus, being a veteran guy, is using it to his advantage. I deviated not because I wasn't interested. I knew he wasn't going to answer the question. And who knows, maybe if I kind of take him off and then, one of them can get their answer. I don't know. I was kind of self-serving and being a team player at the same time. But that all being said, listen, I walked in that room knowing he wasn't going to answer that question with anything other than day by day. Because if he knew he was going to start, he would have declared it in his opening statement.
So who would you start if it was up to you? Who starts Saturday in New Orleans?
I think health dictates that. I really do. So, in the situation where you have a guy, if the scuttlebutt is to be believed, if you believe you have the guy who is your starter in the room already, and you're expecting or hoping or guessing that he will be the starter to make the leap into the Big 12, this one head injury situation, you don't want too much craziness to go on that. Not to mention, the last thing you need is for there to be scuttlebutt in how you coach the team when you're about to jump into the Power Five. There's a lot of big picture implication here. The American Conference Championship is a great thing to have as you're going to the next level. Fans want that. You want that. It looks good when you're jumping into that, because now PR matters more in college football than it ever did. And TCU's in the top 4 without hiring a marketing firm this year. Who knew? But the punchline is this, Eric Lopez. If you take JRP out and you don't get to the conference championship, what you have saved yourself from is scrutiny and any sort of controversy surrounding the health of players and how that's looked at here at UCF.
Why can't both play? Like, I would play both. I would start Keene, who's played well, especially with the passing game. Offensive lines played better, but I would also play JRP and give him a package, because Gus loves those packages. He's not going to stop running those. I think there's room for both. I personally think both will play this Saturday. That I don't know anything, but that's because, man, Keene's played well enough to where, man, if you bench him now, go back to JRP, and if he gets off to a bad start, I think a lot of people are like, what did we do? I think it's easier if you start Keene and bring JRP off the bench, personally. Honestly, I thought that's how they would start the year. They chose not to do that.
Well, we've talked about
the offensive line. Right. Turns out the line issues was an issue, but I would play both.
Yeah, and listen, man, my guy Eric Lopez, the Duke of the Diamond, throwing in the concept of the off-speed pitch, nails it here. Absolutely. Of course, playing both of them is an option. You said starting. That says to me I have to narrow it to one guy who's going to come out of the tunnel first. But absolutely, if JRP is healthy, there could be an opportunity for both guys to play. Throw them completely off. If the perception is that they're two completely different offenses when they step on the field, which I really don't think the difference is as big as advertised. It's just a matter of the percentage of success that you're going to have in one set of plays with another. You're going to do better running with JRP. You're going to do better passing with Mikey Keene down the field. I get that. But at the end of the day, these skill players are so talented, Eric Lopez, that if they're given the opportunity and the quarterback doesn't screw it up, right, all you need to do is manage the game. They're going to take care of business. And we've seen that on how many tight ends in the country this year have hurdled dudes. I'm sure it's more than just Alec Harler, but it's not a lot.
Doesn't seem like a lot. And here's my thing. I think if you win this game, with respect to Navy and no respect to South Florida, they're going to win those two games, regardless of who plays quarterback.
Right.
To me, this is the game you've got to hit the right quarterback. I think you can pick the, quote, wrong quarterback against Navy and South Florida and still win. Whereas this game, if you make the wrong choice, it could cost you the game. It could cost you the conference title game. So I think there's room for both, because I think you do bring up a good point. I do think John Rice Plumlee, I think the staff believes he's the guy for next year. If Thomas is Castellanos, it's either him or Thomas Castellanos. And I do agree with the theory of, hey, you got to play you got to have your quarterback ready for next year when you go to the Big 12. I do believe that, because it gets real and it gets serious next year, and you're playing for the playoff, a conference championship. And by the way, even if you don't make any of those, the bowl games in the Big 12 bring much more money than what the current deal is. So I think it's much more relevant next year. However, you are in a position here to possibly host a conference championship game if you win out. And I think this is the game where you've got to be right about the quarterback. And that's why I think you play both. I do think you play, because I think they both can help you win against a Tulane defense. For all the talk about UCF's defense here, Kyle, they're the top defense in the American.
That's a fair point. And listen, I'm taking nothing from Tulane here to be entirely clear. I'll put it this way. Willie Fritz has continued to improve this team, and then he hit the pandemic and had to kind of reset. But you heard Gus and the players at the weekly presser say it when we were coming off that field after, having a close game with them. We knew that next year they were going to be a problem. That's what I know. Gus said that. I know at least one of the players say that. It might have been Holler that said it. It might have been.
Well, what concerns you about Tulane? What's the concern? What do they bring to the table that could present UCF some problems here?
I mean, you mentioned the defense. They're an experienced bunch. I feel like, and I haven't done the side-by-side comparison, right down the roster, but it feels like as experienced as UCF's DBs are, their entire defense is at different levels, right? So you might have a new guy thrown in here or there, whereas UCF's defensive front is Tremont Mars-Brash and Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste as advanced, like, aged guys. And that's basically it, as far as returners to the program. I know we have some transfers that are older than that, but I digress. Like, for me, that's going to be the difference. I don't think you're dealing with a receiver core that's quite as tough as, let's say, in East Carolina, but Pratt at quarterback is a lot more balanced than Holton Naylor. So there's a lot of balance. It's hard for me to really think about how Tulane would hit UCF because they don't necessarily have a pronounced strength, Elo, right? Playing ECU, you knew they were going to sling the ball because of Holton Naylors. Playing Cincinnati, you knew they were going to try to pound you on the ground and then beat you over the top, winning where they could, and couldn't in the case of UCF for the most part. But yeah, with Tulane, it's that balance that's scary. They can hit you a lot of different ways, and their defense, I agree with you, is underappreciated.
Well, Pratt's a mobile quarterback. It's a dual threat.
Right.
And UCF hasn't seen that since Malik Cunningham, and we saw the problems that Malik Cunningham presented to UCF. I don't think, though, Pratt's at the level of a Cunningham. I think that's the good news from a UCF standpoint. And look, Tulane, it's been a nice story, but I also still skeptical about how good Tulane is. I mean, here's who they've beaten: UMass, Alcorn. They won at Kansas State. That's a good win. Lost to Southern Miss. Huh? Beat Houston in overtime.
Yeah.
Which was a big win. Beat East Carolina, held ECU to 9 points. Then beat South Florida, gave up 31 points to South Florida. Beat Memphis, and then won at Tulsa. Their schedule's about to get harder. They're UCF, then they've got SMU and Cincinnati, does Tulane. I think the pressure's on them to win this game. They're at home. This is their biggest home game since the 70-some years. They're ticked off because College Game Day's not there. They did a mockery of a game day when they announced their jerseys, I guess, for you. I mean, I get it. If I was them, I'd be upset too, because who knows? They may be the only chance they ever get to host game day. But there's pressure on them, and whereas UCF, they've played in these big games before. I think that does help UCF in this case.
Oh, 100%. And you beat me to the point. Like, I feel like with this game, they can technically afford to lose it and still do okay with a shot at the conference championship. If UCF should win out, they still, if Tulane loses and both teams win out, Tulane, all they've given up is the opportunity to host the conference championship. They're not out of it. And heck, if they win out and UCF falters somewhere, they still have the advantage over the remaining two teams in SMU and Cincinnati to still host.
Right.
So, UCF needs the game more, period, point blank, end of story. That ECU game, again, continuing to haunt UCF in its own way. But it all doesn't matter if UCF wins out for them, right?
This is the one for UCF. They're right. You're right. There's pressure on both sides for UCF. You lose this game, you're probably going to be out. You're going to need some help. Something to keep in mind, Tulane has a good back named Spears, 762 yards rushing, averages 5 yards a carry, 10 touchdowns for them. The receiving core, you mentioned, there's not as explosive, but they're very balanced. D.D. McDougal, 23 receptions. Jaquan Jackson, 21 catches. Deuce Watts, 21 catches. Pratt does a nice job of spreading the ball.
Exactly.
Which is fascinating. He's not going to, so that'll be an interesting test for the secondary. How do you think Travis Williams will approach this Tulane offense? Does he blitz more? Does he play? I mean, do you see any different changes on the UCF defensive side?
Well, see, here's what you're looking at. What really makes Pratt dangerous? I mean, sure, he can run, and they got a balanced offense with a coach that's able to put together a good scheme, throwing different guys open, and is supported by an excellent back. However, what you need to do to disrupt all this, this, Elo, it's a matter of finding the weakness in the protection up front, exploiting that, and make the quarterback make a bad decision. I don't think T-Will changes a whole lot in his defense at all, right? As it is, it's a bend, don't break strategy. Keep everything in front of you. Don't give up the big plays. And when it's crunch time in the red zone, hold them down and keep them out the end zone. And I think you're going to see more of that here. And if the pass rush gets to Pratt on the way there, more power to the defense, or put them in a situation where they make mistakes with penalties somehow. That's the kind of stuff that benefits, and that's kind of stuff that kills offensive drives, is when you get penalties for a defense that's waiting on you to make a mistake.
Defensively for Tulane, Dorian Williams is the name to keep in mind. 72 tackles to lead the team, 6.5 tackles for loss, leads the team, 4 sacks, has an interception. The guy's a playmaker. Nick Anderson, not to be confused with Nick Anderson of the Orlando Magic, 4.5 tackles for losses, 69 tackles. Interestingly, though, Tulane only has 14 sacks in 9 games. They're not a big pass rush team. That's been what's been interesting about their defense is. So I think if UCF's offensive line here, Kyle, again, it goes back to them, right? They play well, give whoever the quarterback is time, I think the offense can have success.
Well, here's what I'm looking at, too. Don't be shocked when Bowser starts the game. He's going to be in there, part of that extra protection element to stop attacks like that from the linebacker, and also to make the second level available if there's an opportunity where there's a designed quarterback run, regardless of who it is, by the way, Eric Lopez, because we've seen that Mikey Keene is not JRP. I won't ever think or ask for Mikey Keene to return punts jokingly, as I've done with JRP in the past. That being said, you have a guy who can carry the ball like Bowser while also being a good enough fullback to open a hole for him to do so. Don't rule this out. It's a very funny thing. And then over and above that, the pass protection. You know what's, if Bowser gets NFL snaps, he's going to get it on the strength of his protection. That's the stuff that the versatile running back gets paid in the NFL, and it's a wonderful thing to see that what Bowser's doing it. For all the advocacy for RJ Harvey, who's a great back. He's done
there's room for both to get touches.
Absolutely, and they will. But he's going to start with Bowser. If they establish a lead, that's when you'll see Harvey come in to clean up.
UCF Tulane, 3:30 kickoff on ESPN2. Anish Sharaf and Brock Osweiler.
Interesting.
To call the game. Well, first there. UCF Tulane on the dudes. Did you ever cover Brock Osweiler in your NFL cover?
I did. He actually came in when Tannehill got hurt during the Tank for Two a year. We had to put stock in Brock, was what I said. Granted, I sold my stock in Brock back when he was drafted by Denver in the first place, but who knows? Maybe he has a lot better rates for his stock as an analyst than a quarterback in the NFL. Who knows?
Well, maybe I'll ask you about that on Night Shift after the game. We'll have Night Shift, myself, you, probably Drew will be on there for a UCF Tulane 3:30 kick on ESPN2. Make a note of that, as well as, of course, Night Shift on our YouTube channel, as well as on our social media, Twitter, Facebook. We'll be live after the game for the big one, UCF Tulane. Will UCF be a step closer to the American Athletic Conference Championship game, or will they need help? We'll know after this game. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, Kyle and I are going to talk a little hoops. College basketball season underway. UCF men's. Some concerns after the opener. We'll break down men's basketball. And then the women. The Cynthia Messer era gets underway with a win. We'll break down what to expect from both teams and questions. All that coming up as you're listening to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.
Welcome back here to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Eric Lopez along with Kyle Nash. College basketball season is underway. Both the men and the women got underway on Monday. We'll talk about both and kind of share our thoughts for the big picture this season, since with the weird Monday start, and then, oh, by the way, Nicole popping in, we didn't get a chance to just focus on basketball and kind of give a preview thoughts. But partly maybe it worked out, Kyle, because a lot of new faces on both sides. And on the men's side, boy, there's a lot of new faces. Obviously, a wild, wacky Monday nighter against UNC Asheville, where they lose 98-95 in double overtime. But as we found out, Kyle, UCF was shorthanded. They were without Darius Johnson. They were without CJ Walker, which we knew going in, and they were without Ty Freeman. That's their 3 experienced guys, who all were probably going to start. So you had literally everybody that played for UCF on Monday was brand new. and they faced a UNC Asheville team that literally had as upperclassmen. I mean, I think the majority of the roster is juniors or seniors. They, including their Big South Player of the Year, Pember, who was unbelievable, scoring 40 points in the game. A tough loss for UCF, Kyle, but I can't really evaluate this team because they're not even together yet. Like, I like some of the individual pieces, but I don't care who you are. You're losing when you're missing three guys, or probably you were going to be three starters, especially we'll say Johnson and Walker were definitely starters. And I think Freeman might have started because of his experience, and nobody talks about, but he brings that defensive energy that they were lacking on Monday a little bit. I think that hurt him a lot. You had a lot of new guys. Obviously, we'll talk about Taylor Hendricks and the positives, but to me, this team is an incomplete. And I'm not going to evaluate this team because they're not all the pieces aren't together right now.
No, and that's a great point. And listen, for my money, Eric, what it comes down to for me when I'm looking at the stat sheet, like I wasn't there for all of it. I saw most of the game, not all of it. I was analyzing the women's game. And got to be able to catch some of the end of it because it was a double OT. But listen, for my money, what was it I said to you before the game even started, Elo? You asked me what I was concerned about, and I answered the size in the middle, right? CJ Walker not being there, already a huge blow, and now they're coming in with Pember. Listen, there's a reason he scored 40. And I mean, no offense to Michael Durr, but at the end of the day, I don't think their strategy was to be throwing, throwing Ithiel Horton and anybody else they could at him to help out, right? Or any of that group in there as well. Because, and no offense to Taylor Hendricks, his job isn't necessarily to mix it up and battle down low either. He's going to be going around, he's going to be slashing, he's going to be attacking. Think of him more as a shorter Dirk Nowitzki kind of type in my mind, right? So with all that in mind, who's left to battle Pember? So
well, they were thin, right? They were thin. I mean, you're playing Thiermo Sila, you're playing Lahat Sion. 6 minutes got in the Utah transfer. You're right. They need CJ Walker back. They're hoping to get CJ Walker back soon, maybe as soon as Florida State, maybe not. Who knows on that? Whereas Darius is a little lengthier of an injury. But let's talk about this roster real quick. Taylor Hendricks is to me the bright spot. Let's talk about him. 23 points, 5 boards. 3 blocks, 2 steals. He's the highly touted recruit, the highest rated recruit ever in the Johnny Dawkins ever in UCF basketball history. Man, he was fun to watch. He got off to a slow start as he's trying to figure things out, but once he figured it out, to me, that's exciting. I think when you look at UCF basketball this season and some of the storylines following Taylor Hendricks' maturation will be fun to watch. I think he has the potential to be the best front court player, both offense and defense, that UCF's had since Keith Clan.
That's a statement. And listen, I'll say that and raise you this. First of all, not even a first of all, I'll just say this. The scuttlebutt at Hoops Media Day at UCF was don't expect Taylor Hendricks to be around for more than 2 years because he's going to be leaving. No, not the transfer portal, folks, the NBA. That's the thought right now, depending on who you ask, around the campfire there, so to speak. So yeah, and I'll put it this way: CJ Walker's presence is going to be great too because he's such a versatile player. And by the way, does Pember score 30 points, 25 only if CJ Walker's on the floor? It's a very interesting thing to examine.
Yeah, no, Walker's a big part of this. If you put Walker and Hendricks up there in the front court, it's a whole different story. And I'm looking forward to seeing that whenever that does happen. Brandon Suggs, the ECU transfer, 16 points. I love his aggressiveness. I think he's a nice addition there. Ithiel Horton got 9 boards, 12 points in 44 minutes. I like some of these individual pieces here, Kyle. And I think actually, believe it or not, if they can get these guys healthy, and that's a big if, as we'll get into later with Darius, if they can get this group together, I actually like this group maybe as a whole better than the team in last year as a whole. You could say, well, they're not as experienced or as talented, but as a whole, I think they fit better once they learn once they're all connected and playing together. The question is, when does that happen? I don't know, but I actually liked some of the pieces here. CJ Kelly off the bench, 20 points in 34 minutes. I like some of the individual pieces they have here.
Oh, certainly, Elo. I mean, listen, to say the least, this group as a whole is better just on the general fact that I think we got more guys that can create their own shot, right? So you mentioned CJ Kelly with 20, and he did that missing 8 threes nonetheless. Imagine some of those connected, right? He was the reason why CJ Kelly's going to be so big on this team, and don't be surprised if he makes his way into the starting lineup sometimes too. Look at how much he got to the free throw line compared to the rest of his counterparts. 15 times to the free throw line. 15 shots at the free throw line total, and CJ Kelly has 6 of them, and he made them. So it's elements like that are going to make the biggest impact. How much that on both teams, frankly, but the men's team depended on free throws and keeping the turnovers down last year was amazing, because they did, as a team, they didn't shoot as well as this team does based on this, albeit small sample size, right? So I'll put it this way. They don't have to feed it to Darren Green to get any sort of long shooting going or hope, a Darius Perry heats up. They have multiple options. You got a young guy like Hendricks who's already contributing. You had, I'm counting 5 people in double digits and 2 in 20 points. And Jalen Young nearly got to double digits himself with 8. That is diverse scoring the way Johnny Dawkins basketball is meant to be played.
Yeah, I think offensively they were fine, as it turns out. Defensively is where they had the issues. Johnny Dawkins even said that after the game. He didn't like the lack of communication on the court defensively. Thought they missed some assignments there. But part of that, I think it goes back to not having Walker, not having Freeman, not having Darius Johnson, and that experience. And Johnny Dawkins, obviously Darius Johnson, the surprise. Nobody saw this coming until the warm-ups. I should have known. I was at the women's game, and I noticed Darius was in street clothes, and I'm like, well, is he going to dress? He's got to dress soon, doesn't he? Oh, no, wait, he's not playing. Johnny Dawkins addressed Darius Johnson injury after the game on the postgame.
Darius is still, he's injured. He's going to be out, for a little while. He has a lower leg injury. He's going to be out for a little while. He is going to be back, and he'll definitely be back, before we play conference play. But we'll see what his status is. It's just how he feels as he continues to rehab and get stronger. But it was just a freak play that happened that set him back. Nothing no one could do with basketball. People run into each other all the time, and sometimes they don't come out as well as you would like. So, but I know one thing, he's going to work hard and come back as fast as he can, because that's who he is. And so, but while that's going on, we still have to find a way to win. Still have to find a way to be successful. And we had an opportunity tonight. I don't think we seized it. Coming down the stretch, like you said, coming down the stretch the last 3 minutes, we're up. So we put ourselves in position to win. We have to figure out a way to close games in those situations.
That was Johnny Dawkins talking about not closing the game out, finding a way to win without it. Looks like Darius out a little while. They hope to have him back before conference. But still, that's a big blow. That's a huge blow, Kyle. And you just hate to see that, because I do think Darius makes a difference. He's the point guard, and really it leaves UCF thin at the point guard, because Jalen Young is the only true point guard right now that is playing. The redshirt sophomore out of Dallas, Texas, transferred out of Baton Rouge Community College. After that, when he came out of the game, you kind of had to experiment with a Horton and guys that are not natural point guards to play. So I think Johnson makes guys like Hendricks better. And he's the leader. I think the communication would have been better. Man, I just felt bummed out when I heard that about Darius, because we all enjoyed Darius and what a great freshman year he had last year. And you could tell I rewatched the game on Plus afterwards, because I was at the game. I went back and watched it back because I'm preparing for the FSU game. You could tell that Darius, it's eating him up that he can't play.
Oh, of course. If you talk to this guy for any length as we have, he's just, it's less about me having seen how eaten up he was, and more about seeing how excited he was at both AAC Hoops Media Day as well as UCF's Hoops Media Day. He's into it. He's all about it. Talking about helping Taylor along in preseason activities and all of that. They actually spoke of each other fondly, frankly. So, just to I can only imagine how bad he's feeling about it. And listen, what you say about Jalen Young, folks, there's a reason why dude had 43 minutes of playing time in a double overtime game. I'm just saying. Yeah, no, that's a tough spot there for him, for that, without question.
So, but they're going to have to find a way. They're going to have to find a way to play and without Darius and get by. I mean, the schedule doesn't stop. But by the way, for those that are like freaking out about the loss to UNC of Asheville, you realize there's already like on opening night alone in college basketball, there was like 13 upsets of teams. Like, for example, oh, by the way, Stetson knocked off Florida State, who's UCF's next opponent. You had USC losing to Florida Gulf Coast. I mean, this is college basketball, and teams that have experience are going to have an advantage over a team that doesn't have the experience, like a UCF, especially when UCF is shorthanded. And that's not an excuse. That's just reality. What was fascinating about the Florida State deal, because that is the next game, Friday night, as we talk here, as we record this on Thursday afternoon, it is still on. Florida State comes to town. They're young themselves. They have to replace a lot of personnel, and they lost to Stetson, who just, outshoot them from the perimeter. Big win for former UCF head coach Donnie Jones. So this all of a sudden is an interesting matchup, Florida State and UCF, because both teams are young, trying to figure themselves out. And, oh yeah, Florida State has a familiar friend, Kyle, that we know very well, don't they?
Sure, they're going to be watching Darren Green closely, chuck it from the cheap seats, right? I don't know who the best defender is, but you better bet they're going to get a lot of work out on the perimeter, making sure that Darren Green's shut down. I might even suggest throwing out a diamond in one at him. How about that? There's some lingo.
Well, he struggled against Stetson. It'll be interesting how he handles coming back to UCF. UCF's coaches know him very well, so, there's that little gamesmanship there. But Florida State's very young. So I think these are two teams, Leonard Hamilton and Johnny Dawkins, who I think have similar philosophies. They want to play defense, intensity. Neither of them really played well defensively in their openers. Florida State missed a ton of free throws. I'm really looking forward to that game, 7 o'clock Friday night from the arena. But big picture for UCF here, Kyle. I mean, I don't know what's a realistic goal or expectation for this team, especially with missing Darius Johnson for, somewhat of a period of time. I just don't think it's hard. I think you just got to let this team grow. I think, to me, that's what it is you hope these young guys grow, especially Hendricks, and you build it, you get Walker back, and you get Freeman back, and you get Johnson back, and before conference, and then, you're ready to go in conference to compete. But I can't, I don't think there's, I can't have real, I mean, it's an incomplete. I can't, until I see this, I can't, how can I evaluate this team?
Right. And listen, if I'm an American Athletic Conference coach that's not Memphis or Houston, where I'm clearly going to outmatch UCF when I play them, I'm concerned at the end of the year, and I'm hoping I'm getting them sooner than later on the schedule. If I'm getting them later on the schedule, I'm going to use it as an opportunity to prepare for them in the tournament when I come across them again, because I know it's one game. This sets the table for UCF to be underestimated, and come tournament time, assuming they come back to health and swing into the upper end of their potential, they might find themselves winning a couple rounds in the conference tournament. Better than last year's team that all they had to do was knock off USF, mind you. But at the end of the day, I think this is a group that could scrape together some conference wins, make some noise. I'm not saying NCAA tournament, but don't rule out an NIT.
Well, here's the thing. Bring some cohesiveness. That's a big part of Coach Dawkins' philosophy. And I think for UCF, that's the key to being successful, is you build a nucleus. What made this when they got to 2019, what helped was you had BJ Taylor, Taco Fall, and that group together for a period of time. And they had health. Remember the year before in 18, everybody was hurt. Aubrey Dawkins missed the whole year. Taco Fall missed half the year. BJ missed half the year. So there's that. I mean, I think you look at this nucleus, Hendricks and Young. You start there, and then you go from there with the other young guys that they have. You're building that towards the Big 12, and then you bring another recruiting class that hopefully will improve with being in the conference. But, that's how they're going to be successful. This ain't going to be built overnight. You're not going to be, and I think the thing that was disappointing, I think, to Coach Dawkins, he had a 10-point lead late, couldn't hold it. But that's youth. That's youth, and they didn't defend. They're going to have to defend better to win these games. Because I do think they have some options offensively. I think they could be pretty good offensively, especially when they get Darius back.
Yeah, and let's give Asheville some credit. Like we talk about the defense being an issue, but I stress, how on earth, what did they have to silence Drew Pember? And once they started collapsing, that's when Tajon Jones got busy. They had two guys with 20 or more. One was Tajon at 20. The other was Pember at 40. So, at that point, what more? I get that Coach Dawkins was disappointed, but again, when they're abusing you down low with Pember, That's
but again, I think Walker makes a difference. Walker is the best defender, low post.
That's a great point. Yeah, that's
inside.
A great point.
He's the guy. I think he makes them better defensively. I mean, it just is. So, we got to wait and see. Incomplete. I think there's going to be some growing pains, but I like some of I really was surprised by what I saw because, you don't know what you're seeing coming in. And I was encouraged with what I saw from some of the individuals despite the result. And look, it's college basketball. The UNC Asheville's beating UCF is more common in college basketball than it is. And we got to stop this too. The fans, you cannot compare football to basketball. It's idiotic. There's two apples and oranges. College basketball, there's way more teams that care about basketball as far as like UNC Asheville, they invested that they care about basketball. Everybody cares about it. It's not like football where there's a gap in roster talent. Basketball, because of guys departing earlier, because of the transfer portal, there's much more even playing field where a Stetson can go in and beat Florida State. A UNC Asheville can beat UCF. A Florida Gulf Coast can go and beat USC out west, among others. Results like that. I mean, that's just a handful. There were like 13, 14. Louisville, look at who Louisville's lost in the first two games. They lost to two teams. You're like, what? That's college basketball in a nutshell now because there's so much youth and constant roster turnover.
They may not have the excuse of injuries either. Now, granted, to Coach Donkin's credit, Pember did eventually foul out, but I don't know that these other instances, Elo, were missing this nucleus that you were talking about.
I agree. Before that men's game, and we had women's basketball. Cynthia Messer's debut went well as UCF women's basketball blew out Winthrop. Now, they were supposed to play Mercer. That got scrapped due to Nicole, which means once again Kyle misses Mercer. And I know you were looking forward to that. But let me ask you, you've obviously now seen this team more than anybody. Nobody has seen this team more than you. You were there at the exhibition against St. Leo, and you were there against Winthrop. Your thoughts now on the women's team and what we can expect this year?
Listen, the versatility came more than what I even interpreted as the Tia Messer promised. Sure, you have guards at 6'1" that shoot three-pointers. Sure. They're chucking it 30 times from three. Elo, they made 11 of them. And, the team under Coach Abe may not shoot 11 threes. I think you said in a week. I might say a fortnight, depending on what stretch of games we're talking about. I don't know. But I don't know that they'll make 30 all year if they're coached by Coach Abe. And here we have 30 loosed in one night. Even Coach Messer said, wow, they love the three. But I'll put it this way. There's a lot of movement. There's still some miscommunication that's pretty obvious, but we also heard Coach Messer relate to it as well in the form of all the injuries they're facing. Nate Hutton missing, just as one of a handful. And for my money, Elo, I'll put it this way. This group isn't just a team that can chuck it. They can also play solid defense, right? Rangel Ranke, who may have only had 6 points, but it was the first two scores of the night, also was the second highest in rebounding. Of course, we all know Destiny Thomas had the most in rebounding with a double-double, but they had 4 players, Elo, in double digits, 2 of them on the strength of chucking it from the cheap sheets, okay? With this particular aspect in mind, if that doesn't spell versatility, I don't know what does. And hey, give credit to some of these players who held on, right? Ashton Verholst, who's coming off the bench, was an Abe product. You didn't see her actually get any action to speak of. Not any sort of slight against her game, but I think that's because you had that much talent and experience starting at the time under Coach Abe. So there's a lot. And by the way, true freshman Brianna Hardy, thanks to all the injuries, comes in, leads the team in scoring, and she's not shooting threes, folks. She's bumping around in the low post. Late in the game, Brianna Hardy gets an and one. Second person, actually, after Rachel Ranke to congratulate her is none other than Destiny herself. So it was an amazing thing to observe, just all the versatility that this team has to offer. However, one thing that I know Coach Messer slammed on, because she answered it in one word when I asked her, what is it you'd like to see this team do better? Turnovers.
Turned it over 26 times.
Yeah, they only turned it over 23 at St. Leo and then got worse the next game.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's a lot. the real test for this UCF team when it comes down to it, though, Elo, I want to see what they look like when they play somebody with size. It's going to be interesting to see.
Well, let's talk about it. They have a couple injuries. You mentioned already. Asia Todd out with an ACL. They have 2 players out with an ACL injury for this season that Coach Messer mentioned in the post game. So their depth has been already challenged here a little bit here, Kyle.
Yeah, you mentioned Asia Todd. Actually, for my money, like I think that's not even the injury that Coach Messer was referring to. I came to find out later. There's another player who up on her Instagram that I saw, thanks to Stephen Leonard on Twitter there, had announced that sorry about that, had announced that she's done for the year. And it's Morgan Robinson and Wegu. I had to look at it.
Very good. I was waiting to see how you get that one there.
Okay, hold on. I want to make sure I see it spelled before I give this a shot. I'm not the PA guy like you and Jeff are, so you practice.
I'm definitely not a PA guy. Jeff's the PA guy. See, this is where Jeffrey could help.
You're calling the games. You're still broadcasting. You got to get names more than I do. Lately,
if I get asked to fill in on the women's side, I'll definitely be hardcore on that board. Yeah.
There you go. But the punchline is like she was expected to be a starter. Nay Hutton was expected to be a starter. Tay Gibson had a concussion. She left that game late to have Brianna Hardy finish it, if I remember correctly. And I'm sure I'm forgetting. You mentioned Asia Todd already, so we're good there. So there's your 4, right?
Yeah.
And granted, this put Ranky in the starting lineup. She was a double-digit scorer in the exhibition. She had 14 instead of Brianna Hardy. And, of course, Hardy coming in first regulation game that counts, right, as a freshman. And she was absolutely excited about it.
So they will now go to Campbell next Tuesday, to play on the road. Then they come back home the following Tuesday to host Louisiana Monroe. And ironically enough, Kyle, you'll be in Louisiana on your way to Louisiana while women's basketball is hosting Louisiana.
Hey, yes, it's because in-laws, man. Don't rub it in.
Maybe you and Mercer, you should have just told Mercer, could you just flip the game to play in Louisiana? Because I'll be there anyway.
No, tell the brother out, man. Yeah.
Right? But other notables, they'll be at Auburn December 3rd, at Tennessee December 14th. To me, the big question with this team this year is, how does the, quote, players, the remaining players that from last year, like a Destiny Thomas who had a double-double, others, blend in with Messer's players? If they blend in well, I think this team will surprise. I think this team could be a top half team in the American. I think they actually, but you could buy them low in the conference. I don't think the conference is anything special. I think South Florida is the team to beat. But after that, I think it's wide open. They can move up if they mesh. And we don't know if they mesh well or not. We'll have to see how they play together on the court, if they fit, the pieces fit, or if it's one of those things where they don't fit and transition and it's more of a transitional. It's a transitional year anyway. But that's to me, Kyle, how does those group of players fit together?
Well, the evidence is that it's been strong too, right? Layla Jewett had a 3 in the other game. And, when you have Asia Todd in the starting lineup at one point, that tells you everything. And if I got to explain Destiny Thomas to you, Elo, you're not paying attention.
But you do bring up a good point. What size do they have behind Destiny Thomas? What if Destiny Thomas gets in foul trouble, right? Because in the past, that was what made the last couple of years so successful, is they had depth, right? You had Kaba, you had Brittany, you had Destiny Thomas off the bench. I don't get a sense they have that this year.
Well, actually, as a team, they're quite a bit taller now. Granted, again,
maybe not proven though. Maybe not proven at this point.
Proven is where we're at. Yeah, listen, Taylor Gibson is going to have her impact as well. I get it that not everybody is Destiny Thomas. She's a complete other animal. But if Ashton has to be asked to work low, she can do that. She has the size for it, though she may not have necessarily as wide a shoulder base as Destiny does. She's tall enough to mix it up in there too. Taylor Gibson has a good build. She can battle down low. She was excellent at times, granted in the exhibition against St. Leo. So obviously Desto is the main force. No one's going to hide from that. But and listen, when Nay Hutton comes back, I think we're going to be surprised, right? At AAC Hoops Media Day, Nay Hutton was compared to Charles Barkley by
I think WNIT is realistic for this team if they mesh, right?
I'll say the evidence is good at this point, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention another freshman who kind of comes in to give the guards a rest in Sierra Godbolt. She's shown her own toughness at right when she's seen time on the floor herself.
Yeah, I think the perception is that the cover is bare because everybody went to Athens.
The office staff left with the coach, for goodness sake, Elo.
Correct, but it's not all cover bare. There are some remaining talent, like a Destiny Thomas, among others, that come back. Plus, you added some people from the portal. I think this team's a little better. I'm not saying that I don't think they're a conference championship team per se right now. Maybe they can grow into that. We'll see. But I think if, again, I'm going to go back to it. If this roster fits, because remember, you have a certain group of players that came to play for Coach Abe under a completely different system. How do they adapt to the new system? Then you have these players that are playing under the current system. How do they mesh? You know, if they win, things go well. If they lose, how do they handle that? If they handle it well, I think they could be okay, and I think they could be a top half league team in the American and possibly get into the WNIT. If they don't fit, then, you know, it's a rebuilding year.
That's what it would have made this Mercer game fun to watch, is we would have seen some of that, I think. But yeah, I'm totally with your point on that too. I think this is a group that it may not be as tough as Abe's team, but again, that's a squad that gave Gino Auriemma a life-changing experience at the tournament last year. This is a different group. Will it leave Gino whining at the mic when they play UConn? If they play UConn, probably not. Is this a group that can get past USF? We don't know yet, because again, they've been physically imposing their will on their opponents thus far.
Right. This team's got a little more perimeter. They believe with Ranke and company and Hardy, they can shoot more from the perimeter. Totally different style. They play more man-to-man, although they will mix it up with the zone. I know she wasn't happy with how they handled Winthrop's zone. We'll see. I think everybody's kind of like wait and see, right? But I think there's upside here. It would not shock me if this team finished in the top half of the league in WNIT like it would for a lot of people. Because I think a lot of people just assume like, hey, this team has nobody left, and, you know, they're going to struggle. Not necessarily.
Well, I'll make this last point. The cupboard was bare for all we knew because we didn't know Destiny Thomas's status. She did decide to stay. So for all intents and purposes, she had left the cupboard as well. But with Destiny coming back, and give Satia Messer credit on a short window of time, think like Gus Malzahn did when he came in, restock this cupboard with some quality groceries to do some cooking.
Wow, cooking. There you go. Good word there. That's Kyle Nash. Kyle, tell the audience where they can find you, what you got working on.
Hey, listen, honor, joy, and privilege, folks. I'm looking forward actually to focus on football this weekend with that Tulane game. Looking forward to the night shift. See if I can get in there and, you know, drag Drew Glukove out of the negativity pool there. Granted, he may be opting to work on the knee-jerk reaction, which you should all check out on the blackandgoldbanneret.com once it goes up shortly after the game. And, you know, mixing up with you and Bryson after that game, I think will be fun. And we can either lament, I can save you from canceling the program, Elo, or I can celebrate with the concept that the conference championship became a very real possibility. That is how important the game this weekend is. Find me on Twitter at the SOTG, on Instagram as the same. Also, Black and Gold Banneret on Instagram. Follow that as well. And of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you aren't already, because that'll be a good time there too. A lot of post-game action and weekly presser action that Bryson Turner and I and others contribute.
You'll also be at the Florida State game Friday night.
I will be at the Florida State game Friday night. How could I forget? You'll find stuff there after that game on the YouTube page and on blackandgoldbanneret.com as well. Thank you, Elo, for allowing me to plug that.
I will be there as well. I was planning on being with you, but I've been called to fill in for the great Mark Daniels, who'll be in with football. So I will be on the radio side on 96.9 with Taylor Young calling the men's basketball game. Go easy on me, guys. Go easy on me.
Hey, listen, you're an award-winning guy. You're going to be fine, Elo. I'm looking forward to it.
You can also watch it on ESPN Plus with Austin Lyon and Michael Donnell as well. So a lot of great options for that UCF Florida State basketball game.
Why would I do that when I could hear you? Hello.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Kyle, for the kind words. When we come back, we'll talk women's soccer making the NCAA tournament. Why didn't they host? I have the answer to that. Plus, Kyle mentioned about Cynthia Metzer bringing in talent. you Cindy Ball Malone's bringing some talent over, baby. Wait till you hear what she got in her signing class ranking. That's all coming up on this edition of the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. And welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Of course, big news, UCF women's soccer on Monday found out they will in the NCAA Tournament. They will be going to Raleigh to take on North Carolina State. NC State is the 8th seed in the regional. Now, this year, in women's soccer, they seeded 32 teams in regions 1 through 8. And UCF was placed with NC State, with the winner of that game to play likely UCLA, who's the top seed in that bracket, portion of the bracket. For UCF, it's the first time that since 2017 they are in the NCAA Tournament, fresh off winning the American regular season championship and then losing in PKs to Memphis, which officially goes as a draw. UCF got in, was one of the last teams announced, because they were one of the last brackets announced. Got a little nervous at the watch party there as I was there covering it. You wondered at times, like, boy, what's going on here? There were some expectations to host. UCF's RPI was 22. They did not get to host. They get instead sent on the road. Still a big accomplishment to make the tournament. And following the selection show, myself alongside our good friend Trace Trocco from Sons of UCF Live host, got a chance to talk to Coach Sahaydak for her reaction on the team, on the bracket, and this upcoming season.
I'm thrilled. This team's worked really hard, and we were all just waiting to hear our name get called out, and it happened. It made us sweat it out a little bit there.
To the last page.
I was getting a little nervous, but, RPI of 22, we felt good about our chances, and it's well-deserved, and the team deserved it.
What do you think of the matchup just upon initial glance?
Yeah, of course, I haven't done a scouting report on NC State yet, but, initial thought is that we're traveling to a place that's very easy, so headed to Raleigh. Tim and I are very familiar with Raleigh, but we were in Chapel Hill earlier this year, so a quick, direct flight, so I don't think travel will be too tough. And like I said, the players are familiar with the area, so I think travel should be easy. And then NC State, obviously, they're a great team, but we're ready to play them.
Take me through the process as the selection show is unfolding. It's unique this year because they're seeding 32 teams. So what's going through your mind as each bracket comes out?
I mean, my hope, to be honest, was that I thought we were going to get seeded. I think we were, deserved to be seeded, but it doesn't always go that way. And I'm just glad that we're in the tournament and we got in at large bid. But so it's a little nerve-wracking when, places were getting taken. But like I said, we're happy, we're thrilled. We've got nothing to lose. That's our mentality. We've made it this far. We've done all the hard work, and now we're going to fly.
You said you thought you deserved to host. The resume was there, right?
I think our resume was there, and having an RPI 22 historically, that gets you a seed. So I was really hoping we can host. Love to play in front of our home fans, but it is what it is, and I'm just happy that we're in, and we're going to take any opponent that we get. It doesn't matter where we are in the country, we're going to get after it.
What does it mean to get back in the tournament? It's been since 2017, especially for the seniors like Caroline and Kristen and the rest of the senior group.
It was so important for us, like Tim and I and our coaching staff, to give the seniors an opportunity and have that feeling and that experience of having a real postseason and getting to the NCAA tournament. They've developed so well over the years, and they've stuck with us through the years, and they just deserve it so much. So we wanted nothing more than to have them have that experience and that opportunity. So we're just thrilled for the seniors.
It's a couple days after a tough loss. What's those days been like with your team?
Coming off a count, well, first we're counting it as a tie because technically we tied. But a penalty kick, shootout loss, I mean, it can go either way. It's like tossing up. We feel like as a coaching staff and the team feels we prepared for penalty kicks, and, it didn't go our way. And it was still a tough feeling and a tough loss in penalty kick shootout because we were at home and we saw ourselves celebrating, and a championship on our home field. But I think that's part of the journey, and the team has dealt with it. We had a couple days off just to, mentally give ourselves a break, physically give ourselves a break, and we got back together on Sunday, had a great vibe on Sunday, and then training today, like I said, we were flying and everyone's just excited, and we're just going to go forward.
No one likes the taste of that, so that's motivating in and of itself, isn't it, for your players?
Yeah, I mean, no one likes to lose the penalty kicks, and that's always hard to swallow, but like I said, we've got big goals, so you just have to pick yourself back up, roll your sleeves back up, and get focused, and now that we know who our opponent is, we can focus even more.
Give me this year for you. It's been unique. We've talked about it, how you've been involved with the U.S. national team to help them qualify for the World Cup and the Olympics. You're balancing that with coaching this team. Tim obviously has filled in. What does this mean for you when you look back on this? I know you're not thinking about that, but this is one like you're going to be talking about for years to come, I would imagine.
This is, you said it, like a very unique season for us, and especially for me and Tim, and me being away with the national team, like you mentioned. But the team is so resilient, and they're so supportive. And, you know, we had experienced this situation in the spring. Obviously, it wasn't our competitive season, but I left a lot in the spring to be with the national team, and we prepared for that for the fall last spring. And obviously, the team is in great hands when I'm not there, and just proves it. Because Tim had a great record while I was gone. Part of me said, maybe I shouldn't come back. But yeah, the team's so resilient and so supportive, and very trustworthy, and they're trusting of us. So it's just a great vibe and a great team, and I'm just really, I keep saying it, but I'm just so proud of the group.
That was head coach Tiffany Roberts Sahaydak Monday following the selection show. Thanks to Trace, by the way, who provided the audio on that one, talking to Coach Sahaydak afterwards as well. As we both got to talk to her. And look, obviously, a couple things there. Let's talk about, obviously, they're not seeded, even though they had an RPI of 22. Why were they not seeded? So I decided to kind of look into it. There were 4 teams this year. Again, this is the first year that women's soccer seeded top 32 teams. Volleyball will be doing the same thing as an experiment. They will seed 32 teams. There were 4 teams in the top 32 RPI that did not get a seed. UCF at 22, Xavier at 25, Brown at 28, and Arizona State at 32. The teams that did get a seed, LSU at 33 RPI, Portland at 41 in the RPI, Mississippi State 34 in the RPI, and NC State, UCF's opponent, with a 39 RPI. So why did those 4 get a seed, which means they host the first round, and teams like UCF did not? Well, one of the things I noticed is the committee, it looked like, rewarded teams for top 25 and or top 50 RPI wins. For example, LSU went 1-3-3 against the top 50. They went 1-5-6 against top 50 teams, but they got the 1 win in the top 50, so they got the 32 seed. A little questionable. Portland went 1-3 against the top 50. Their 1 win was against Utah Valley. UCF had a draw against Utah Valley. NC State went 1-5-2 against the top 25 RPI teams, 2 and then 3-11-4 overall against the top 50. So they got the benefit of the doubt there to be seeded in the tournament. Then Mississippi State 1-3 against the top 25 RPI, 5-8 and 4 overall against top 50. Compare that to the teams that didn't host. UCF, for example, their final bracket 0-1 against the top 25, 0-1-3 against the top 50, 0-2-3, in the top 50. Xavier went 0-3 against the top 25, 0-6-2 overall against the top 50. Brown went 0-2-2 overall against the top 50. Arizona State 1-6. Arizona State was the only team that had a win against the top 50 that's in the tournament that did not host, did not get a seed. So obviously the committee put a value on the top 25 and top 50 wins. The thing that hurt UCF was not necessarily the draw against Memphis in the semifinal, because again, on the record, that is a draw. That's not a loss. What hurt them was that SMU didn't win the conference championship. SMU, going into the championship game against Memphis, had a 41 RPI. They lost in double overtime to Memphis 1-0. That dropped Memphis all the way down to 51 in the RPI, and as a result, it cost UCF a top 50 win. I think if UCF wins the conference tournament, do they host? Probably. If they lose to SMU or draw and lose on PKs to SMU, I think they host. If SMU beats Memphis, I think UCF hosts. The one scenario that UCF could not afford was the one that actually played out, which was that Memphis beat UCF on PKs and then beat SMU on wins in overtime to get the automatic bid. They will be going to St. Louis, by the way. So as a result, UCF lost a top 50 game. And I think it cost them a seat. I think if UCF had that top 50 win, I think they would have gotten the benefit of the doubt over Portland. Because you look at Portland, they are slated to play Alabama in the second round if they win their first round match. Now, granted, they're playing Arizona State and all that, but they would have played Alabama, the 2 seed. That makes a lot of sense. I think UCF would have been in that slot instead of Portland. I could see UCF had hosted Arizona State this weekend, perhaps. Perhaps UCF could have been in the LSU side, in that 32 side. I know there was a lot of people that thought that. There was a lot of projections that follow the sport thought that they would be placed with FSU in the second round. It was LSU instead. I don't think the committee wanted to put UCF and LSU together because they played in the regular season in Baton Rouge that ended in a draw. And they could have been in the slot with NC State. They could have easily, maybe they flipped NC State and UCF instead, NC State hosting. I think that Memphis SMU result was the difference maker there and why UCF's not hosting. The good news for UCF is this is the last year they will have to worry about this because the Big 12 is a much stronger league than the American in soccer. Really, the American was down this year. That's what hurt UCF. Everybody RPI-wise was down in the American. It didn't get the quality wins, but that won't be an issue in the Big 12 where you have all these opportunities for top 25, top 50 wins. That's what helped LSU. That's what helped NC State in the ACC, for example, etc. So I think that's at the end of the day what cost UCF from hosting in the first round. It is what it is. You heard Coach Sahaydak's thoughts on it. They're in. They're going to play at NC State. I think that's a toss-up game on Sunday. We'll see how that goes. Could be an interesting matchup there. And if they win that, more than likely, they'll be going to Los Angeles the following weekend to take on UCLA, which would have been an incredible storyline a year ago. Considering Amanda Cromwell was the head coach at UCLA a year ago. That could have been a fascinating storyline. She's obviously not the head coach there anymore, but I think that could favor UCF if they get there because UCLA has a new first-year head coach. So, but we're getting far ahead of ourselves, and of course, we'll see how that plays itself out. So UCF, NC State this weekend, Sunday in Raleigh for the NCAA tournament for UCF. We'll see how that goes, but really happy for Kristen Scott, and Daria Raja'i and the rest of the senior class and Caroline Delisle to get into the NCAA tournament for the first time after winning the regular season title. Really well-deserved and happy for that group and that staff to make the tournament. Of course, Coach Sahaydak, a busy years. I asked her there. She's the assistant coach on the U.S. national team. This past summer, they won the CONCACAF tournament in Mexico to qualify for next year's World Cup as well as the Olympics in Paris. So she will be the assistant on the U.S. national team on the World Cup next year. So congrats to Coach Sahaydak. Of course, speaking of the World Cup, the men's announced their roster. They're going to play in a couple of weeks against Wales, November 21st. And UCF's own Sean Johnson makes the roster in a bit of a surprise. He's one of the 3 goalkeepers on the U.S. national team. Probably the number 3 goalkeeper. I don't think he'll play in the World Cup. You never know. Kind of a surprise because of the guys who didn't get picked. Zach Steffen, who had been the main starter for the U.S. national team. But congrats to Sean Johnson, who I believe is the first UCF men's soccer player to play on the U.S. national team in the World Cup, or at least be on the roster. So congrats to Sean Johnson, who's had a great, really last few years. Won the MLS Cup last year with New York City FC, was the MVP. This year, I think, was regarded as the best goalkeeper in the MLS. Got him to the semifinals this year before losing to Philadelphia. So congrats to Sean Johnson on that. Volleyball knocked off South Florida in straight sets. They go on Wednesday night in Tampa. It's their final meeting as conference teams. UCF goes now 20-0. They went 20 straight against South Florida. They never lost to the Bulls during American Athletic Conference play during the decade run. UCF improves to 22-1 overall on the season. They're trying to get themselves in the mix to host themselves. They had an RPI as of Monday to 14, dropped to 16 after the South Florida win, but they're in the mix to host, and they're also in the mix for the conference championship. They're one back of Houston, who's undefeated. And you look at right now the hosting situation for volleyball. I think there's about 13 teams that are pretty much locks to host, and I think there's 3 spots available among these teams. Creighton and Marquette from the Big East, UCF and Houston from the American, Rice from Conference USA, USC from the Pac-12, Georgia Tech from the ACC, I think are the teams in the mix. UCF got some help last weekend with Georgia Tech losing to Miami. Miami was a team UCF beat, so that helped UCF's resume and moved them up in the RPI rankings there. But I think those teams, you could throw in Penn State as well. I think all those teams are in the mix for 3 spots to host in the next couple of weeks. UCF will host Cincinnati this Sunday at home. Then they go on the road. They have Temple and ECU. That's not going to help their resume. And then come back home for Tulane. And then the big one on Black Friday against Houston, which could have massive ramifications, a conference championship, hosting ramifications, national seeds, a bunch of them all available there. UCF ranked 24th, by the way, in the AVCA poll, Houston 23rd. But keep that in mind. You're probably anti-Creighton, Marquette, Rice, Georgia Tech, USC, Penn State if you're UCF. And you need Miami to keep winning. You need SMU to keep winning. It wouldn't be the worst thing if SMU were to knock off Houston here down the road there and maybe help UCF's resume after UCF's win over 2 wins over SMU this season. So McKenna Melville is 8 kills away now from 14th place all time in NCAA volleyball history in kills. She reached 2,400 in the victory over Memphis on Sunday. And then finally, big signing day in softball. UCF ranked 16th best signing class, according to X-Rating Softball on Wednesday. Back-to-back top 25 signing classes for Sydney Ball Malone. The Knights rolling, continuing that momentum, that wave from their incredible 2022 season with back-to-back top 25 classes. 16th best class, numerous talented players on that roster, that class that they will report in the fall of 23. They will be part of UCF's first season in the Big 12. Coach Ball Malone, though, already building young talent to go with back-to-back top 25 classes. And, oh, by the way, they still got to get some returners coming back for this upcoming season as they try to end the American with going a second straight conference championship and great talented players coming back. But, man, recruiting, they're knocking it out of the park. And you could argue right now that on campus, Gus Malzahn and Sydney Ball Malone might be the top recruits among all the programs as far as getting them ready for the Big 12. They're both doing a pretty good job recruiting-wise. So congrats to softball on that. Well, we've run out of time on this edition of the Black Gold Banneret Podcast. Thanks to Kyle Nash for joining us on the show. Making sure you keep it on blackandgoldbanneret.com for all the latest. We'll preview the Tulane game, big one. We'll recap the Florida State basketball game, as much more. We'll have night shift following the Tulane game on Saturday, probably around 7-ish o'clock Eastern. We'll follow the women's soccer game against NC State, as well as volleyball. We cover all UCF athletics here on the blackandgoldbanneret.com. Make sure you subscribe to their YouTube channel, as well as on our Twitter and Facebook pages. And, of course, subscribe to our podcast. Leave us a 5-star review. Give us a nice comment, will you? That will help us out a lot as well. So, for the whole everybody, Black Gold Banneret, Eric Lopez saying so long. We hope you've enjoyed this edition of the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.